Hello everyone, my name is Ned Ryan. I'm the founder of American Majority and a board member of the American Conservative Union. What you're about to hear over the next couple hours are talks about innovation and creativity and perhaps new ways that we can approach winning the messaging battle. Our first speaker today is Tom Basile of Sirius XM Patriot Radio. He's also a Forbes contributor. Tom is a powerful political commentator, columnist, and speaker. He's becoming an even more powerful voice for the policies and politics that will keep America free. He's an opinion contributor to Forbes and a host for Sirius XM's Patriot Channel. He's also a frequent contributor to FoxNews.com and a range of nationally syndicated radio programs. He was the executive director of the New York State Republican Party from 2009 to 2011, and prior to that served in the administration of George W. Bush. During the Bush administration, Tom served as an advisor to the Coalition Provision Authority in Baghdad. He was awarded the Joint Civilian Service Commendation Medal from the Department of Defense in 2004 for his work with the coalition government. He is an alumnus of the Bush-Cheney 2000 campaign and served as a consultant to the RNC during the 2004 elections. An elected official in New York's Hudson Valley, in 2011, Tom was one of only 2 American conservatives featured in Time Magazine's Person of the Year edition about activism around the world. Tom is an adjunct professor at Fordham University, where he teaches political communication at the graduate level. Our first speaker, Tom Basile.
Ned Ryan, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to put this back up here. You know, Ned is such a terrific example of somebody who had an idea, had passion, and together created something that has had real impact all across America. And if you haven't been to some of the grassroots training sessions that are being hosted by American Majority, please do. They're running from 10 until 4 or 5 tomorrow, and it's a wealth of information. This afternoon, you're going to hear from several different people, all from different backgrounds and who bring different experience levels to the conservative movement and to expanding the conservative movement. They all have one thing in common, however. They are innovators. Each of these people takes an innovative and even courageous approach to the way that they communicate about American values. Now, we're going to start off today with me discussing how we expand the conservative majority in America through effective communication. My wife and I, we have a 2.5-year-old and we have a 17-month-old. And that's the wrong slide on this one, but that's the right one. We have a 2.5-year-old and we have a 17-month-old, and every single day over the last 6 months, we have had a debate in our house about what to feed these 2 kids. And if you have kids, you understand that they are very picky about how they consume things, what they consume and how they do it. We finally got to a formula for my son, so we now know what he's actually going to eat and how he's going to eat it. My daughter, on the other hand, will eat everything in sight. Now, we think that will probably change. But it's very similar to how we have to manage our own communication in the way that we discuss our values with the public. And I forgot the clicker, so I'm going to go up here and grab that and advance. We have a challenge as freedom-focused people in this country to demonstrate leadership by making a connection, making a critical connection with real people about the challenges they face. Now, what do I mean by real people? I mean your friends and neighbors who don't eat and breathe politics the way that you eat and breathe politics. Folks who are trying to make a living and get their kids to and from soccer practice and piano lessons and trying to hold on to their job and grow their business or go to school. the people who were beyond these walls. And democracy fundamentally is about choosing. And it's our responsibility to give the American people a real choice, a clear choice between the policies of the left, which decrease freedom, and the policies of what is a center-right country and the real American DNA, which increase freedom. And we've got a great advantage right off the bat, folks. We don't have to lie. We don't have to lie. The liberals in this country have to convince people that the American system is fundamentally unfair, that you are a victim of it, that the government is going to solve everybody's problems, that you're not going to pay for it, and that there is a master-servant relationship between the government and the taxpayer. And you have to give them credit. They've been giving people this line for 40 years, and they've been fairly successful. So what do we have to do? We have to understand how people make decisions and how better to talk to them. And that begins with sort of this fundamental truth about politics and successful communication. And that is, it's about addition and multiplication, not division and subtraction. So the first message up here is, when you go back to your communities, when you go back to your organizations, you want to develop messaging that is going to reach a very broad audience, the broadest audience possible, talking about American values. Who's our competition? These guys? Is this our competition? When you're talking to somebody about the freedom agenda, when you're talking to somebody about limited government or local control or personal responsibility, who is really your competition for the mind share of that individual? We have to change our thinking, because it's not them. It's not the Democrats. Yes, Bruce Jenner's sex change operation is your competition. People have a limited amount of time. They are bombarded with millions of dollars in messaging and marketing from all of those brands every single day. So if you've got 5 minutes at home where you finally get a chance to sit down, what are you doing? You're watching YouTube and you're watching cats fall off pianos. You're not necessarily listening to somebody talking about a conservative message or politics or policy. So we have to internalize that. Remember, our responsibility is not to convert people. I have this debate with folks all the time. Our responsibility is not to take that lifelong Democrat and make them a Republican. Our responsibility here is to begin a conversation about what the future will look like if we go down one road or if we go down the other road. We're planting a seed in somebody's head that can lead ultimately to a change of behavior. So it's not an us versus them discussion. It's not black versus white. So the day of one message meaning something for everybody is over, and we have to realize that. This is the state of American politics today. We're going to hear a lot up here on this stage that we have a center-right country, and you know what? You're right. But 43% of the people in this country, whether they're registered Republicans or Democrats, consider themselves to be independents, and that's very instructive for the way that we have to communicate not only at a national level, but at a local level. The party labels just aren't as important as they used to be. Take a look at the generational split. Millennials consider themselves not right or left, not liberal or conservative. They're in the middle, and pretty much a third of every single demographic group from an age perspective is in that growing center. And we'll talk in a few minutes about why that's true, about sort of the DNA that kind of makes up these different groups and why they think the way they do and how to talk to them. So one of the things that I like to tell people is, since the labels matter less, we still can be true to principle without leading with the label of conservatism or republicanism. Everybody in this room is a steward of the same values and philosophy of our founders, which means that everybody here is an ambassador for Americanism. Basic American principles are our values, and we should be leading with those values and personalizing them for each of these audiences. So you lead with those common values. You know, our people in this country have a certain DNA. They have a certain DNA. They know that what the president is doing is antithetical to the American way of life. You can talk about it much more intelligently, perhaps, because this is something that you consume on a regular basis. But the fact of the matter is, it is in the basic DNA structure of the American citizen to be responsive positively to a more freedom-focused, limited government message. This is your brain. Really, it's your brain, and it's your brain, and it's my brain. One of the ways that we learn how to communicate more effectively is to understand how people make decisions. And people make decisions, as our friend Frank Luntz is fond of saying, and consumer marketers have said for 40 years, as a combination between rational and emotional language. You have to give people a little bit of both. Of course, recognizing that the emotional side of everybody's brain is a little bit more powerful. Well, okay, sometimes a lot more powerful. And this is why you'll be on a presidential campaign or you'll be working in your local community and somebody will say to you, you know, I don't agree with this guy, but I like him, and so I'm going to vote for him. Now, many people in this room might say, yo, that's dangerous. Look at what it did. It gave us Obama. All right? And you look at his numbers. But the fact of the matter is, this is the way people make decisions. They're going to vote more often for the person that they come to see as more like them than the person that they just agree with on the issues. How do people make decisions then? They make decisions from the inside out. They make decisions from the inside out. They look at how the decision or the message impacts themselves, their household, their community, and then the nation and the larger world. The environmental movement kind of learned this the hard way. Back in the 70s, we had a very robust environmental movement that was fairly mainstream in this country. They were talking about two things, air and water, both things that every single person here consumes. And then it kind of went to save the world, save the whales, save the spotted owl, and they took it so broad that nobody was able to actually grab hold of it. Today, the climate changers and the global warming folks are doing the same thing. When did they actually start, people who have a common sense environmental message, when did they start getting some traction again? When they started talking about CFLs and hybrid cars and personal savings and efficiency, things that impacted the household, and they led with that message. So consumers are far more pragmatic than they are idealistic, and they're based on those perceptions of risk. So whenever possible, we want to communicate how something affects voters as individuals or people like them. You want to humanize your issues. You want to get personal. Don't throw cold data at a values-based argument. It just doesn't work. So essentially, we need less Pennsylvania Avenue, less Washington, less White House, and much more Main Street, local community, local impact, local households, local businesses, in the way that we take the issues and the challenges that we face as a country and we make them mean something to the electorate. This is an example. You want to personalize and you want to engage. How many times have we heard somebody on cable news say about Obamacare, the CBO has revised up the cost of Obamacare to $2 trillion over 10 years. America can't afford this bill. Well, if you go back to your local community, or if you're a conservative and you're on television talking to those real people that we started out talking about, what's more effective? That, or we were told that this was going to make healthcare less expensive, but I'm paying, or my neighbor's paying, or my sister's paying $1,000 more a year. That's a mortgage payment. That's my food bill for 4 months. Make it relatable. My family can't afford that. You see how we're taking the message and we're bringing it down, we're bringing it home. Here's another example. This is a mistake that the president and the Democrats just made. President had this brilliant plan to tax 529 plans, remember? We as conservatives actually did this right. We responded to this the right way. The liberal commentator, and that quote is a paraphrase, the liberal commentator up there gave us 47%, $150,000, $47,747,000, was making this class warfare argument that's all too common. And what did the conservatives in this country do? They made the personal argument. Why would anybody want to take away the freedom of somebody to put $50 or $100 into the savings account for their kids? Why would you do that? It just doesn't make sense. You make it personal. Just in my last couple of minutes, we want to go through a couple of these demographic groups. And look, I teach a class on this at Fordham University in New York, and I do a whole semester on the stuff that I'm doing in 15 minutes here. So we're just going to go over and touch some of the tactics that the consumer marketers and our experience in leadership and policy have shown us. Winning over independents is very important for this group. And because we have such an opportunity as people who are talking about American values to speak to this group of people. Many of these folks are already disaffected Republicans, so they've left the door open for us to prove ourselves to them that we can lead, that we can be relatable, and relatability is key. Joni Ernst's campaign in Iowa is a great example of that. Bring the message down home. Obama bashing will not win over independents. They're past him. They know, whether they can articulate it or not, that the president is bad news. That there is something fundamentally wrong with the direction of the country under this administration. So you want to be able to give them more. You want to be positive when talking to an independent voter or a moderate voter. And you want to be solutions-oriented. Remember, everything that we talk about has to center around leadership and providing real-world solutions. And that means being for something, not just against somebody. We make this mistake over and over and over again, and then if it happens to work by happenstance, we pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, aren't we great? But the fact of the matter is, unless you build brand loyalty and you build confidence with these people, there's still going to be a lot of uncertainty in what they do. They're still going to leave the door open to the other side. Baby boomers. We have baby boomers in the audience. I can see the baby boomers. Baby boomers are not old. They may be senior citizens. Please don't call them senior citizens. They're not aged. They're not aging. They're not elderly. For us, articulating our American message, we want to treat our retirees as folks that are just moving into a new, exciting portion of their life where they are as relevant today to the overall conversation and to the future of this country than they were 10, 15, 20 years ago. If your messaging gives them that feeling emotionally, then you've got an opportunity. You've got the door open to be able to talk about your message with the baby boomer. Baby boomers also come from a time when, one, they're very skeptical because they came from the 60s and the Vietnam, and they came of age during the age of Vietnam and Watergate. They're very skeptical about government instinctively. But if you engage them on an ongoing basis and you make them feel relevant, you have a shot at articulating your message effectively. Gen Xers. As a Gen Xer, I can relate to a lot of this. Understand something about Gen Xers. They are an enormous opportunity for the people in this room because they are self-reliant and they prefer flexibility. Liberalism has nothing to do with flexibility. It has to do with command and control. So if you're talking to a Gen Xer, you want to emphasize the fact that freedom, their freedom to be able to do what they want to do with their money, for instance, that is a huge selling point. They're also self-reliant. And that coincides very squarely with our messaging and our values here. They're impatient, and they want to see they want to be able to understand your short-term goals and your long-term benefits. So you need to give them solutions, not platitudes. Talk about specific ideas. Don't worry about whether or not a Gen Xer is going to nitpick your idea one way or the other. You're going to get credit for having an idea in the first place. Millennials, and there are a lot of millennials at Cpac. There are always a lot of millennials at Cpac. Millennials want to make it visual. They want it to be personal, and when we talk about personalizing and engaging a message and talking to somebody about what's in it for them, millennials take that to a whole new level. You want to make it personal for them, and you want to talk to them using the mediums and the style that they are used to. So, as I wrap up, as you go home, get out of your comfort zone. When you go back to your organizations, don't just talk to conservatives, don't just talk to Republicans. The echo chamber is great. We're going to leave here feeling energized at the end of this weekend, but it's not the end-all and be-all to the strategy. Don't dismiss any age group or any ethnicity because it's too hard. It is hard. Protecting freedom is hard. Protecting freedom is worth doing. God bless you, and thank you very much. And now, I have the great privilege of introducing someone who I've admired for quite a long time. And he was born in Russia at the height of the Cold War. He was trained as a fine artist, and he began to draw caricatures of Russian officials and sell them on the streets of Moscow when he was a teenager. He joined the dissident movement, which eventually helped bring about the collapse of the Soviet Union. And his activity did not go unnoticed by Russian authorities, and they gratefully let him leave in 1991. His political artwork in the United States has been equally bold, and everybody in this room has seen it, and you're going to meet the man who brings it to you. His work has made headlines and ruffled the feathers of many a politician, which is bound to happen when you depict the President of the United States as a proctologist. He is the principal artist and a contributing editor for National Review. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Roman Genn.
Good. I'm going to start here, then go downstairs. Please forgive my speech impediment. It's actually a California accent. I came to this country 25 years ago, never looked back. And when I lived in the Soviet Union, I did underground art for about 3 years, starting in '88 and continuing till I decided to look for a better climate. I was invited here to specifically talk about what we did there, how we did it, because it's very applicable to what we can do in this country. Satirical art has been a thorn in the thigh of authorities for maybe 2 millennia, from time immemorial, since the first Egyptian cartoon of an antelope and a lion trying to eat her. We always constantly, for centuries and centuries, managed to get in trouble. And as far as I know, the first time that the colleagues of mine were murdered was unfortunately this year in France. And it is a great loss for our community. We got in trouble before. We were in trouble with Napoleon. Napoleon tried to get James Gilray punished, the British cartoonist. Hitler tried to hunt down David Lowe. But this is the first time we actually lost our members of our community. And how do we respond to that? We didn't. We just put on T-shirts, Je suis Charlie, which are completely meaningless unless you draw Muhammad. You are Charlie, if you draw Muhammad. If you're not drawing Muhammad, you're not Charlie. So a lot of fine artists I know in New York, wonderful artists, did a lot of lame caricatures of white lawyers and Congress members and something, and they think they're brave. Well, they're not. So, but let me go back to Russia 25 years ago and tell you what we did there, because it might get you thinking and might inspire you for what you're doing today. Now, considering that the media has changed, I do believe that street art is actually way more powerful and important today than it was 25 years ago when we had newspapers and magazines. The viewer today is so spoiled that it is incredibly difficult to grab his attention in a printed media. But street art solves that problem because you're in your car, you're walking to the office, and you see this poster. It will inevitably draw your attention. So what we did in Russia was exactly that. We did it because we didn't have any access to newspapers or magazines, so we just copied our drawings and showed them on the street. Now, of course, we got. I was the first one to do it, not because I'm so smart, but because I was 17 years old. So, so when you're 17, you do a lot of things and you get in trouble. So I got in trouble the very first day that I did a caricature of Gorbachev, who was the president of the Soviet Union. At the time, many of you probably weren't born even, so I'm giving that historical outlook on what it was. It was one of the vegetarian periods in Russian history, which is so rare. So they didn't kill us, but actually we got in trouble. Not very much. We were jailed for a day or two, but not more than that. And I was kicked out of college that I attended. And so after that, I decided that it was time to leave the motherland and settle in California, which treats me much better. So we got in trouble right away, because it's very important to understand what you can do and what they can do to you. And the lesson number one we learned was you have to pick a fight with those who will fight back at you. If you draw something, if you put a drawing of somebody who does not fight back, then you're hitting the air. So you have to pick the crooks and the hypocrites because they will always respond, because their whole system is based on that hypocrisy and lies, and they have to respond to you in order to shut you down or tear down that poster or street art, whatever you're doing. So number 1 point, pick a fight with somebody who will respond back. Number 2, very important, you have to put your art where it is difficult for them to get it down. So you have time to prepare. They don't have. They don't know you're coming until they see you. You have time to prepare. So be creative, get ladders. You might get electrocuted a couple of times when you try to put your poster on the power line, but you will learn. A couple of years ago, a bunch of Russian protesters put up a poster in Moscow right in front of Kremlin calling for Putin to leave. They took mountain climbing lessons in order to put it on a sloped roof. That poster lasted there for about an hour and a half because very selfless cops took it down. Now, if they asked me what to do, I would have told them, because it was in the middle of the winter, I would have said, bring some jugs with water and water that roof, because in 5 minutes it's going to get really slippery. And no cop, no matter how selfless, by the way, there were 2 cops over there. I thought they came for me, but apparently not. Maybe they're here for Sabo, who is following me. No matter how selfless the cop would be, he would not take that poster down because of the slippery roof. So, but those things you learn by doing them. You cannot learn tactics by sitting at home. The other thing which is important is you have to concentrate your forces. You cannot do actions around the country hoping to get some 5-minute attention. You have to concentrate. You have to get a group of people together. You have to stick with a certain action for a certain amount of time. If you stick with that action for a certain amount of time, the people that you're attacking, A, will not know what to do with you because they don't know what's next, and B, they don't have the resources to counter you. So important thing is concentrate your forces. Now, let me briefly talk to you about what they did to us. First of all, they arrested us with no reason. That's how they started. You have to understand that this period was from 88 to 91, and the political climate in the country has changed quite a lot. So they started with arresting you for no reason at all. They just hold you for 3 hours because by the Soviet law they could not hold you for more than 3 hours. So they held you for 3 hours until it was dark. Then they release you, but the day is gone. You cannot exhibit after that. The second thing they started to do is they get the concerned citizen to write a denunciation of you. So some guy comes in, says, which of course they knew who it was, and he was pre-selected already. He writes down he writes a complaint that you've insulted his proletarian sensibilities by insulting Secretary of Agriculture. So then again, they arrest you, hold you for about 3 hours or so. Then, after it failed, they started only arresting us on communist holidays because they were afraid that the deputies from, you see, Russia is organized like an evil empire from the American science fiction movies. So there's a mother ship, and then there are all kinds of little things around. So if you strike at the mother ship, the rest of them die. So what they worried about that for communist holidays, all kinds of tourists and deputies would come from all over the country to Moscow, where I lived, and they will see those anti-government cartoons, and they will take it to their respected regions, which is exactly what happened. So because nothing was going on in those small towns, And when a coal miner comes to Moscow, buys those anti-government drawings or poems or whatever we did, because I collaborated quite a lot with poets who were writing anti-communist verses. So they buy it, they take it to those towns and show it to the people. So it was sort of a seed of dissent that we could spread all over the country. So they started arresting us on the communist holidays. Then they stopped doing it, and what they started doing it, they started to organize us. They created a trade union, which was a street artist union, put their men in charge of it, and issued a proclamation that you cannot exhibit or sell drawings unless you have a certain permission from that union. So the union bosses were, of course, in cahoots with authorities, so we didn't really have a chance. But we challenged them into the open election, and for the union, challenged them, and they backed down, and we could exhibit some more. But after a certain amount of encounters with Moscow cops, I was arrested, and my apartment was searched, looking for drawings, which was that gave me an idea that I probably should leave the country. That actually changed my mind, and 2 years later I was in Los Angeles. After that, street art died down, because under Yeltsin there was nothing really to protest, because Russia was quite open, until the new people came recently, which is 10 years ago. Mr. Putin came, and underground art is getting back into business and starting to flourish. Unfortunately, Russians are not as vegetarian as they used to be 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So now our colleagues they have not jailed cartoonists just yet, but they have jailed performers and singers under trumped-up charges. So this is not a safe environment for the artists in Russia. Now, in this country, what are they going to do to you? Nothing, really. I worked for National Review. I had to get a desk job because I'm a middle-aged man now, so nobody respects me unless I wear a tie. So all they can do is really write down a letter and say that we're disagreeing with your portrayal of us. And White House, I'm informed, turned down our 10 of our copies that we sent to the White House Library because of the, I don't see that cover. I did a President Obama as a proctologist for National Review cover, so apparently White House was upset. But they will not send any thugs to, that's there you go. So that upset President Obama or his staff. We don't know exactly who, but they didn't want anything to do with our magazine for that particular cover. So you really just go out and do it. You will have a lot of fun. And I recently read something by Richard Nixon that when young politicians would come to him and ask him for advice, he always told them that if you're waiting for good polls, or you're only running if the party supports you, and you're calculating too much, don't do it. You will make a lousy candidate. And that, I do believe, the same goes for the artists. If you expect immediate rewards, or you're trying to, like Shepard Fairey, I believe, who is very good. You're doing street art to advance your financial situation. You will advance your financial situation for sure, but you should not be doing it. Only the only people who should be doing it is people who believe in it and who have this ruthless fixity of purpose. And that will get you there. You will win. You cannot lose if you have that belief in what you're doing. And plus to that, you will have a lot of fun. It's truly a lot of fun. It's very interesting. You feel great about it. You feel young. And I remember with a great fondness. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Roman Gann, ladies and gentlemen. Another round of applause for him, please. Talk about a guy who's been really in the thick of it on the streets, but from the streets of Moscow to the streets of Los Angeles. Our next speaker believes, as I discussed earlier, that the right has a great message, but we haven't been very adept at telling our story or slapping down the leftists who try to define us. His aim as an artist is to be, quote, as dirty, ground level, and as mean as any liberal artist out there, more so if I can. Use their tactics, use their methods, appeal to their audiences, the young urban street urchins, with a message that they never hear in a style that they own. He's one of the conservative communicators who understands that we have to give people images and messages in formats that they want to consume. In addition to producing his signature street art, he also works in conjunction with Los Angeles activists who produce and distribute timely posters utilizing raw, hip imagery. His work is very brave, and I believe that this may be, if not the first time, one of the first times that he has spoken publicly at a meeting like this, at an event like this, about his work on the streets of Los Angeles. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sabo.
There's a few people. Hey, how you doing? Thank you. Oh, no, I'll just sit right here. Thanks. Wow. My name is Sabo. I'm a Republican guerrilla artist out of Los Angeles. First off, thanks for having me. It's a great honor to be here. I don't do speeches, so I'm sure I'm going to sound like I'm rambling, and please forgive me, but a friend of mine was telling me the other day that there's these huge shelves of ice populated by these herds of penguins that just float through the ocean, and they're constantly looking over to see if the water's safe. And there's always this one wild-ass penguin that's, I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna go in. And then finally dives in. And then that moment comes when all those other penguins realize it's safe. And it's a beautiful thing because like this huge herd, they all like just jump in together. And it's all because of that wild-ass penguin that had the balls to jump in. I dedicate this speech to those bold people in France who would rather die with a voice than live without one. Oh, and by the way, I hear I'm tweeting really hard with the Communist News Network right now. All I can tell CNN is it's called the First Amendment. Blow me. In the spirit of the First Amendment, Cpac is honoring Duck Dynasty Phil Robertson with the Andrew Breitbart Defender of the First Amendment Award. Now, I don't believe, or I don't agree with everything Mr. Robertson agrees with, but I do appreciate that he stood his ground when Hollywood came and pushed. And in the end, it was Hollywood that buckled. The dirty little secret Hollywood doesn't want America to know is that there's an entire half a country out there starving for a message that isn't the same old crap that gets pumped out of that town year after year. Being conservative-minded in the entertainment industry and in the arts can be a career killer in that town. And I appreciate why some people are scared. You've got FOA and all these other organizations that have their super secret meetings and their anonymity because they don't want to get figured out for fear of losing their jobs and their friends. I get it. Today I'm not wearing a mask or a hoodie the way I normally do when I show myself online or wherever else because I feel it's important to come out of the shadows. It's more important than trying to push some, how do you say, it's more important than trying to push some mystique that's not even original. Being a right-wing artist in Los Angeles, I've experienced more than my share of troubles out there. I remember about this time last year, there was this one idiot reporter named Ben Mankiewicz from the Young Turks. He was sitting there laughing. He was saying, a Republican street artist, what, are there only 6 in the country? And it just blew my mind that he was such an idiot. He didn't realize the irony behind what he was saying. I mean, was I supposed to apologize because I don't fall in lockstep with the other 99% of the artists out there? And then you have Tommy Christopher, another one of these people that pretends to be a reporter, who in one of his blogs called me just about everything bad you can call a Republican, a bigot, a misogynist, a homophobe, an anti-Semite. But unlike the way I normally do business, I was polite with him. I tried to have a conversation. I invited him to look at my art. That way, if he had any questions, I'd be more than happy to explain to him the context. That way, he could see that there was no basis in the way that he painted me in his story. But his response was, because I was so evil, I wasn't allowed to have a voice in his forum. At first, it kind of scared me. Here's a guy telling the world all these awful things about me while making it impossible for me to defend myself. Then it occurred to me that this is but a microcosm of what the right has to deal with every day with the left. But instead of tucking tail and running, I took action. I scheduled as many interviews as I could with as many people as I could. That way I could get my story out there. I didn't want his voice to be the only voice out there defining who I was or who I am. For decades, the right has allowed itself to be defined by its opposition, be it through magazines, music, television, movies, the arts. In this way, the left owns the narrative. And through our absence in the creative fields, we pretty much just handed it to them. In doing so, we've created these dangerous waters that we penguins float on. A little bit about myself. I was in the Marine Corps. I took the name Sable from a main gun round from a tank. It's short, hard, and fast, and I figured, well, that kind of pretty much describes me, so I took the name. I wish I could tell you I was a poster Marine, but that would be a lie. I served 4 years in the Corps in a tank. I hated every one of them. I excelled the first year and a half, then me, like everyone else, just wanted to get the hell out. The only fond memories I had of the Corps was getting liquored up with my friends, but I mean, I only got in more trouble than anything else. 3 NJPs later, I barely got out with an honorable discharge. But if I was to do it all again, I would, because I'm proud of being a Marine. But all that aside, I mean, if anyone ever tells you they enjoyed their stay in the Marine Corps, chances are they were a reservist. And then, of course, I did the next natural step. I went to college. I went to the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena. It was about in the 5th term I realized I'm going so far into debt and I'm taking heat from a few teachers because we didn't see politically eye to eye. And when I compounded that with maybe 2, if I was lucky, 3 classes in a term were worth a damn, I was like, what am I even here for? I left. I grabbed a piece of paper. I wrote the name of the school on it. I had a few teachers sign it. I handed it to the dean. He asked me, what's this? I said, it's my degree. There's no way I'm leaving here without a piece of paper. And he said, fair enough. He signed it. As far as I'm concerned, that's my college education. So if there's anyone out there that tells you a degree is the measure of a person's leadership or competence, oh, dear God, I just want to remind you, Sheila Jackson Lee has a degree from Yale, and Barack Obama has one from Harvard. That, my friends, put this whole degree argument not only to bed, it puts it in the grave. Some people think I'm here to teach out-of-touch politicians how to connect with young voters. Okay. Speaking of not finishing college, here's a bit of advice for Scott Walker on how he can appeal to young hellions. You remember how those Dropkick Murphys told you to not use their music when you come out on stage? Well, this is what Scott Walker should have told them. He said, kids, Your music's got bought and paid for. Go pound sand. Now, a politician with balls, that's something that resonates with me, and I'm sure it resonates with those hellions as well. That gains respect. The pathetic thing about the drop-kick, one-kick wonders is that with $38, I could go to Hot Topics and be just as punk rock as they are. Or maybe you think I'm here to make a boring politician look cool. Isn't that what I did with Ted Cruz? That's what I heard some people say. It's like, no. Ted Cruz makes Ted Cruz look cool. When all those politicians during the State of the Union address were standing up, applauding Obama, Ted Cruz sat down. When this administration was hell-bent in driving this country over a cliff, he stood in the way with the filibuster. That was cool. While all these other Republicans were keeping their powder dry because they want a squeaky clean image when it comes time to run for president, Ted Cruz was out there, both barrels blazing the whole time, and that is cool. So when I have a politician come up to me and say, hey, can you make me look cool the way you did Ted Cruz with the poster? I almost want to laugh because it's like, baby, give me something to work with. And now Wendy Davis, now she gave me something to work with her filibuster for in support of late-term abortions. With and by the way, I did that Ted Cruz thing with $125 worth of black and white copies from Staples. I did it on my own. He didn't give me his approval. I didn't ask for it. I did it on a grassroots level, and you can do it too. Wendy Davis, like I said, with her thing, I put that albatross right back in her neck. That moniker, Abortion Barbie. She flailed for like a month after that. She claimed she made a lot of money off of that attack. She even tried accusing that Greg Abbott, Mr. Abbott, had something to do with it. Hell, I didn't even know who she was running against. I literally had to Google it. Once again, I did it all on my own. He had nothing to do with it. And whatever money she may have made off of that attack, I assure you she spent twice as much trying to put that fire out. And the best part about that creative hit was I kicked her big wig Hollywood donors right square in the nuts. It's like Spielberg, Geffen, Abrams, you should have seen it, man. I came home, I was tired, covered in glue. All I wanted was to sleep for 30 minutes, but that voice said, no, man, you got to get up. You got to go take pictures. And I got up. And had I been 10 minutes later, I would have missed that photograph of those guys in suits reaching for the power lines trying to take this poster down. Losing my train of thought here. Trying to take that poster down that I had hung up in front of J.J. Abrams' studio, Bad Robot. For $220, I caused that much hell for the left and the Hollywood elite. Speaking of out-of-touch limousine liberals, for $60 in color copies, I had people from California to the UK calling Gwyneth Paltrow an Obama drone. And what did she do in response? She said, oh, we should give Obama all the power he needs to do whatever he wants. I'm like, thank you for spiking it in for me there, Gwen. You are such a tool. And then, of course, people are like, oh, Fox News, they must love you because of what you do. It's like there's this Fox News reporter named Holly McKay or something. She wrote a story about a tweet that I made about wishing Lee Harvey Oswald would come back as a zombie. So there it was. The Secret Service is knocking on my door asking about this. So instead of cowering in a corner, what I do is I literally wallpaper my apartment with Oswald, Oswald, Oswald. So that way when they come to interview me, and I insisted they did it outside from the other side of a window, that they would see this. And at the same time, I was working on these toilet seats with the president's face on it. So as far as getting support from Fox, as far as I'm concerned, I've never gotten any support from Fox. Hell, I don't even watch TV. But, and I was listening to this young lady, Dana Lash, the other week, speaking about how it's not right to support artists or bad artists who, simply because they're conservatives, this is some kind of creative welfare or something. It's not how conservatives roll. That's not how we do things. Well, I'd like to remind you people, for the past 2 months, Hollywood has been patting itself on the back with the Oscars, the Emmys, the Golden Globes, the Grammys. This is how they gain their importance, and that's how they convince us that they're important. And I'll also remind you that that side of the fence awarded Barack Obama a Nobel Peace Prize for absolutely nothing. If supporting like-minded artists is a liberal trait, then that is one that we need to embrace. In the next couple of months, I'm going to be uploading some tutorials on my website, unsavoryagents.com, so people can see how I do what I do on the streets. That way you can do it as well. I think the judge is going to call this evidence. But I know what I do is illegal, and I'm not trying to drag your kids into the gutter any more than I'm trying to drag them to church. I would just hope that I can touch a nerve with some of those kids that are disinterested politically, who are already in the gutter, with a message that maybe resonates with them. You can't tell me that we can't speak to kids who rebel against the police calling them corrupt, politicians are crooked, the military's a bunch of baby killers. You can't tell me we can't sell them the importance of the Second Amendment. Another example would be independence. What happened to independence? When did it become cool to be a part of the collective hive? A hive, I might remind you, is governed by the very people that they rebel against. It just doesn't make sense. You can't tell me we cannot speak to these kids. The problem is, you know why we can't sell that? Because there's no one out there doing it in a way that touches them. That has to change, and that's not going to change until the left takes their hooks out of our kids from the moment we sit them down and watch Saturday morning cartoons. I have to ask, where'd all the rebel artists go? It's been 6 years. It's been very quiet in LA. Robbie Connell, he was this badass back in the 80s and the 90s. He did the Reagan posters and the Contra posters. You know what he's doing right now? I saw a gallery show with him in Culver City last year. He's painting owls. He's painting owls, Robbie Connell. It's like Obama's dropping Hellfire missiles on wedding parties and children, and Robbie Connell is painting owls. It's like Shepard Fairey and Banksy are in the south of France circle jerking each other with the money they make selling anti-capitalism art. They are now the establishment artists. We're the rebellion. I ask that you join us. I ask that you support us. My name is Sabo. I got 4 minutes.
Thank you very much. Give him another round of applause.
Yeah.
That's courage. That's innovation. That's being bold. And we need more of that to ensure that we keep America free. Our next speaker has a very mature understanding of media from both a commercial and a creative perspective. He founded the Alta Vista Story Studio and Workshop, the world's first dedicated agency for original story and advocacy. And by applying the design principles and production values of classical drama and rhetorical messaging and marketing, he and his writer's room of professional scribes developed compelling narratives for a wide range of different types of audiences. Building on his background in the arts, business, and education, he injects innovation. There's that word again. Innovation to his messaging, and he takes it to a whole new level to ensure that organizations can have an impact and can actually bond with the public. He's a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of the University of Pennsylvania, and he holds an MBA from the Wharton School of Management. He's also the director of the Snyder Foundation and a board member of various civic councils, forums, and committees. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Mr. Craig Snyder.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That's a lot of words. Hi, everybody. I'm Craig. Nice to meet you. I guess all of you have heard that we lost the last election because Mitt Romney wasn't considered to be likable. He wasn't trustworthy. We all know that he had the credentials. Rarely has there been a man more qualified to be president of the United States. Barack Obama didn't have a very good record, and yet he won. And the reason he really won is because people bought into his story. They bought into the story of the left, and it's a simple story. And the story is that rich people get rich on the backs of poor people, and the Democrats are the good guys that are going to save the day. That's all they have to do. Now, conservatives, we use logic and reason. We look at problems, we analyze it, we put forth solutions, and they're complex. People don't understand it. They want to give their vote to somebody they can trust. And that is why story eats rhetoric for lunch when it comes to appealing to the emotions of the electorate. Now, I don't know if any of you have any ideas, what age are we living in? Any answers to that? What age? The information age, the digital age, the computer age. Well, you know what? We're living in the age of interruption. We live in a perpetual state of deficit disorder, attention deficit disorder. So if you think what you're trying to do is convince other people to your way of thinking, what's the point of arguing your point if nobody is listening? People zap through commercials, one after the other. They can't wait 30 seconds to hear your commercial message, but they go home and they binge watch a TV show for 6 hours. Right? What's your favorite TV show? Breaking Bad. I could watch that all night long. I love that. So what is it? We're really in the business. If you want to win elections and you want to talk about policy, the first thing you have to do is gain and keep the attention of an audience. Okay, that's it. If you can keep their attention for more than 30 seconds, you're doing a pretty good job. In an age of rabid partisanship these days and the constant bombardment of interruptions that we have, facts don't matter. It's hard to think. There's a new book out there, Fast Thinking, Slow Thinking, for all of you readers and intellectuals. Basically, they have figured out that people are lazy. They'd rather be entertained than to think and work it out. And we live in a complex society. If you're not telling stories, you don't have an audience. So my goal, my wish, is to help cure the story deficit in the reform movement. I don't even like to use the word Republican or conservative anymore. We've been tarred and feathered. Don't you want to go to a cocktail party or a PTA meeting and be able to have a decent conversation with people that you love, right? And yet, the minute you identify as a conservative or Republican, you're evil. It's like I like that expression, like we think they're wrong and they think we're bad. And that's what's happened. So forget about your facts. Forget about your policies. That's for people who govern. If you want to win elections, you got to win people over. And you don't win people over in politics anymore, because the minute that you start talking about your policies, you're not credible anymore. Right? If I'm a conservative, if I'm a Republican, and I start using facts and figures, they don't trust me, I'm not trusted. That ad comes on and says, tell Kay Hagan that you just don't want Obamacare, right? Well, like if I'm on the left, I just change channels. So traditional political advertising and rhetoric and what is called argumentation is like a turnoff to the other side. In essence, you've got of 100% of the populace, let's say 45% is the other side, and 45% is your side. There's 90%. You got 10% in the middle. Everybody's talking about the 10 or 15 or 20, whatever it is in the middle. And yeah, if you think about it, okay, so of that 10% in the middle, good argumentation, good rhetoric, going to get, maybe 3 or 4% on either side. They get 2% in the middle. We're spending $7 billion a year in presidential years to win elections for 2%. We're using big data to micro-target. I mean, geez, we don't, where's the big message going to come from? Where's the big tent going to come from when we're trying to reach out to some sliver of the populace? I feel like Marco Rubio here. I'm going to need water. This is like my speaking debut. So what's the difference between story and argumentation, rhetoric? Right? Rhetoric is the realm of debate. One side says one thing, the other side says the other thing. We're in a Mexican standoff. Story, people talk about story, but it's not very well understood. Telling stories is the primary communication vehicle of man. Before even language developed, stories were told around the cave. And if you're going to win over an audience and keep an audience, you better learn a little bit about drama. When a major motion picture costs $100 million, and that's not very much compared to what we spend in politics, they spend years writing and rewriting the script. They focus on the characters, on the dialogue. They choose every word carefully. There is a design principle in storytelling and in drama, and yet it seems like we farm out these messages to commercial agencies who maybe somehow have some idea of what's inside us and what's the big idea in our party. My goal is to make sure that every one of the major organizations that spend money on advertising and creative and airtime and candidates, they develop story talent inside their organization. It's very important. Story design is ancient. It's been around forever. Aristotle talked about it. I mean, in filmmaking, it's the 3-act design, the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. Story is drama, but it can also be applied to rhetoric. So when you're making an argument in the case of reform-minded principles, you can tell it like a story. So not just a story, it's a story well told. Now, in conservative circles, I've got slides, don't I? Okay, the green thing. So here's my next slide. Data is forgettable. 100 years ago, Hermann Ebbinghaus came up with kind of this forgetfulness curve. It turns out that people do not remember data. Now, you can have the greatest argument in the world and just assume that people believe you. They don't remember it. And when the next guy comes in and gives them their story, that's what they remember. After just 20 minutes, almost 60% of the data that you gave them is disappeared. 1 hour, there's only 44% left. 1 day, 33%. 6 days, 25%. And 31 days, 21%. So if you're using logic, reason, and data, you're not going to get anywhere. Now, there's somebody who knew a lot about storytelling, Walt Disney, right? And he has perfected the art of storytelling. And one thing that stories have, typically good ones, they've got a hero and they've got a victim. In this case, Snow White, Cinderella, Dumbo, the Dalmatians, somebody's trying to get all of them. You know, there's something at stake. And these design principles are time-tested and they're immutable. They work. Every single story, your favorite film, you know, it works. It works every time. Now, it may be about a different thing, but if you don't tell a story with the classic story design, you're not going to have a big audience. We have an entire infrastructure in the reform movement that does not use the basic design tools of story designed to bring in a big audience, to share a big idea. Is there anything that much different between a Hispanic woman and a white male when it comes to wanting to have basic safety in his neighborhood, opportunity for schooling of his children and jobs? It's all the same. You know, we don't have to be like narrowing it down. What the great writers know is that there is a human longing that all of us have, and that's why all the great stories kind of work. So we have to bring design discipline to our message. And you can't farm it out to other people at the last minute and say, hey, what do you think a good idea would be? If you can't look inward and know what your story is, then you shouldn't be spending any money until you know what it is. It's a waste of money, a waste of time. You know, Mitt Romney and his, by the way, he's a great man. His people decided that job creators and job creation was a really good thing. And of course, we know that's true. But I don't think Walt Disney would have thought that, you know, a businessman creating jobs would be kind of a sympathetic victim of undeserved misfortune like these characters. We spend a lot of time talking about the happy talk of opportunity and prosperity for all, but we don't do something that Walt Disney did, and that's create characters like Cruella de Vil, the evil forces of antagonism that are trying to keep us from achieving our goals. Something that happens in a story when you have a main character is you develop empathy for him. So if Dumbo has lost his mother or any of the children, the most vulnerable, they're not just anybody, they're children. We have empathy. And neuroscience is now proving that there are three things that happen that correspond to those three acts in a three-act play. In the beginning, in the setup, where we see our character that has some kind of undeserved misfortune, we have empathy. And then a hormone's released called oxytocin. When the suspense builds, another hormone is released called cortisol. And finally, when the story resolves and we all go like, oh, God, I hated when they did that to me. Well, look, that's called dopamine. We have a mind-body experience. And you know what? I want everybody out there that's watching right now to think about their favorite movie. Think about it. And think about the main character and what you feel for that character. Now, I could stand here all day long and tell you why you shouldn't have that feeling. How many people think they would change their feelings? I wouldn't. George Bailey in A Wonderful Life, when he comes back from like almost committing suicide and sees his wife and little Zuzu, I cry every time. So nobody's ever going to change my feelings, but somebody might change my mind. And we need to create the feelings and connect with regular human beings. And the way we put ideas into the world, the way that man has always put ideas into the world effectively, is through the story. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't use rhetoric. Of course we do. But story is a primary tool to bring in your audience and build them. No good writer that wants to get his ideas into the world goes out and automatically erases 45 or 50% of the audience. They want to talk to everybody. So Hollywood writers don't need big data. They don't need micro-targeting. We're not trying to split things up and analyze them and analysis by paralysis. You want to bring people in. Guess what? It's not just getting people out to the polls. It's bringing people over from another side. Now, I'm yapping away here, and I'm talking about all kinds of things. I'm going to give you a little example of a story. A story has to be relatable. It has to be shareable. It has to be memorable. It is not subject to that forgetfulness curve of data. Your emotional realm has a long-term memory, and it doesn't change. You know, there's a crisis in this country, and you know, it's something that only storytellers will be able to bring us back. I want to just give you a quick idea of a story. Okay, so talking about children, one of the big things that conservatives and reformers care about is academic reform, school reform, giving the most vulnerable people in our society, young urban children, an education, an opportunity for a decent life and a decent job. And for generations, they've been held down. And we know all of the things about charters and school choice and the statistics. Well, here's what I want to do. I want to make a little story called Left Behind. Now, everybody may have their own story. Where does your story lead? This is a story just about a kid. His name is Jared. He goes to a city school. He's 10 years old. His friend Michael and he, both 10, are good students. They raise their hand, they answer questions. They're picked on because not all the kids know the answers. His grandmother, Caroline, is a great cook, and everybody at their church loves her cooking. She makes the best brownies and the best pies, and every Sunday, Jared hates it when he has to get dressed up in a jacket and tie and go to the church. And there, Bishop Jackson is a minister that has a choir, and when you're there, you sing in it, and when you sing in his choir, you come out a person ready to go out into the world. They've heard a little bit about charter schools, and they want to get out. Their kids are getting beat up, and they apply to a charter. And unfortunately, Michael gets in, who's not the hero of the story, and Jared does not. Jared is left behind. This is an 8-minute short film told maybe in 60-second spots episodically over a 2 or 3 week period in a market before the political advertising comes on or the advocacy advertising comes on to tell people about what can be done. You have literally brought people in a subversive way because all of the universal longings of men and families and parents are centered around that kid. We have lost sight of the American story. The culture itself, when it's coherent, they can solve problems. But stories really tell the story of a tribe, and our tribe is split. Like sometimes say we've lost our tribal mojo. Success stories fail. You cannot tell. If Ben Carson tries to tell a story of how he rose from rags to riches, it will only be used and reinforce the argument on the other side. And that is that there's an elite group of people and there's everybody else. You cannot use success stories in a society that is split like this. And what is the American dream anyway? Do we even know? Is it home ownership? I don't know when that was when did that become the American? I don't think the founders said anything about that. I think it had something to do with being inclusive, that every person of any gender, of any color, of any sexual orientation has equal rights in the eyes of the law in this country, and they can rise to the level of their own ambition. Hard work. And is that still an opportunity in this country today? And if it is, are we telling that story? Jonathan Haidt, the author, says that we actually have a better story, and I think we do. When free market capitalism and human freedom became something that this country could develop and export, more people were brought out of poverty in the last couple of centuries in the history of all of man. It's a great story. It's that hockey stick curve, but instead of the curve with global warming, it's the curve of human prosperity and opportunity. We got to tell that story, and we need we need screenwriters, and we need people that understand story, and we got to spend, look, how about just a little bit of money, 1 percentage point of that $7 billion? I mean, it's a lot of money. So we need a good story, a story that appeals to all. And for those of you that are in the media or have organizations where you're spending money, Alta Vista Story Studio will be happy to look at stuff that you're currently producing and give you our thoughts on what its story IP is. We've got room for 2 or 3 clients that just as a goodwill gesture will do it. My name's Craig Snyder. We're the Alta Vista Story Studio. I hope you guys will give a lot of thought as to what your story is in the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Craig Snyder, everybody. Thank you so much, Craig. So we're hearing a little bit of a theme develop in this afternoon session, right? We're talking about communicating a little bit differently than we have in the past, about personalizing a message, about making sure that our message is delivered in a format that is what people are willing to consume. And certainly we can learn so much from what the product marketers and from the media and from these other the other communications industries out there about how we can articulate our message more effectively. Our next and our final speaker is an attorney and a small business owner from Loudoun County, Virginia, not too far away. And he's on a mission to keep his state in the red column. His time in politics dates back to serving as chairman of the Occidental University Chapter College Republicans. He went on to be a professor of law at George Mason University Law School, and in addition to his law practice, he served as a substitute judge in the Virginia District Courts and a special prosecutor in the Loudoun County General District Courts. His service to his community includes the Loudoun County Government Reform Commission and Loudoun County Chamber of Commerce. Just this last month, he was elected chairman of the Virginia State Republican Party. He was previously chairman of the party's 10th Congressional District Committee, which played a pivotal role in Congresswoman Barbara Comstock's landslide win in 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Chairman John C. Whitbeck.
Well, good afternoon. My name is John Whitbeck. I'm the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. Very proud to serve in that role. I'm very proud to be speaking here today at this great gathering. Not only am I the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia, which is by a lot of standards a purple state in the minds of media pundits, Republicans, conservatives, but I also live in the 10th Congressional District, which is considered by a great many people as a swing district. Not only do I live in the 10th Congressional District, I live in Loudoun County, Virginia, which has been told for the last few elections that we're the center of the universe. That if you don't win Loudoun, you don't win Virginia, and if you don't win Virginia, you don't win the United States and send someone to the White House. So I've been involved in party leadership in these very swing areas for a long time, and now I find myself the chairman of one of the 5 swing states that we're looking at for next year. But I don't think we're a purple state. I think Virginia's a red state that doesn't have its act together. And it's time for us to really take a hard look at why we continue to lose elections in places like Virginia where we should be a consistent red state. And let's assume that Virginia is a purple state for the sake of today, but let's look at a blueprint that's already being talked about for how states like Virginia and other states like Ohio and Florida get back to where we can consistently rely on them in the national elections and the statewide elections to elect U.S. senators and governors. First, I think it's very important for us as conservatives and Republicans to realize that data matters in the modern campaign. We have this weird tendency in our state and maybe throughout the nation to silo ourselves. This group of Republicans over here uses this data plan. This group over here uses that data plan, and campaigns are inherently temporary. So when they finish in Virginia, and we've got a campaign every single year because we have off-year elections, those campaigns are finished, and all that data disappears with them. We haven't figured out, like the progressives on the left and the Democratic Party that they control, that we need to consolidate that data. That from the lowest level at the county level or the city level all the way up to the presidential level, we should be using the same data and building the same database. We have the same computers, we have the same technology. What we're not doing is using the ideas behind it and how to maximize it. One of those ideas happened in my state, my Commonwealth, last year with the Gillespie campaign. It's one of my favorite stories from the Gillespie campaign that can show the importance of technology and how well it can serve us. You know, Mr. Gillespie is a good friend of mine, and his technology advisor, consultant that I met a few months ago, talked to me about one of the things that happened in their campaign. They discovered by using social media that Buffalo Wild Wings was a place where right-of-center people hung out a lot. So Ed campaigned up and down the state at Buffalo Wild Wings. Now, I love Buffalo Wild Wings. But that was a creative way that we used technology to discover where our voters were, and as you know, Ed came very close. Those are the kind of ideas we need to have, and those are the kind of things we need to pursue as Republicans. Secondly, it's time for us to move beyond minority outreach to minority engagement. The word outreach has been used for many, many years, and it's sort of outmoded, just like a lot of the Republican ideas about how we reach new communities. We have a very successful state delegate named David Ramadan, who's in the Loudoun County area. Delegate Ramadan is a Lebanese immigrant who was naturalized and ran for the House of Delegates and was elected. Delegate Ramadan gets what minority engagement is. He goes to weddings, he goes to barbecues, he goes to temple blessings in the Indian and South Asian community in his district, which is about 25% of the district. He gets what it takes to win elections, and that is a district that is overwhelmingly Democratic, yet he continues to win. He's a tax pledge signing Republican. He's pro-life. He's pro-gun. He hunts more than anybody I know, but he gets that engaging in new communities and getting new voters is key to our victory, and that's something we need to do in Virginia and elsewhere to turn from purple to red. And it's really time for us in the party to realize how important our women are. How critical nominating candidates that are the best qualified, of course, but looking at the fact that our women are the backbone of the Republican Party. They're the backbone of our society, for crying out loud. Now, I have 3 daughters, so I'm a little bit biased, but I think candidates like Barbara Comstock, who I was proud to serve under as 10th District Chairman, are critical to our success. And it's time for us as Republicans to recognize that. We've been fighting this so-called war on women that they've accused us of for too long. And it's time for us to fight back with the greatest resource we have in our party, and that is Republican women and conservative women. Finally, and I talked about this when I was running for chairman, I've talked about this with just about everywhere I go. It's time for us to be Republican first. We have attached labels to ourselves, establishment, grassroots, I don't know what they call it in some of your states, but here in Virginia, there's about 50 of them I could name that people call themselves. It's time for us to all be Republican first again. But more importantly, it's time for the party to give us a reason to be Republican first again. I know that it hasn't been perfect. I know that everybody hasn't agreed that the candidates that we've nominated in this district or that district are what we all want to see. I know we don't agree on everything all the time. But at the end of the day, in a state like Virginia, where we have lost 3 straight statewide elections by small margins, the difference that could have made those victories from defeats is a united party. And I hope you all will join with me this year and next year. We have a Senate to hold in Virginia. We hold the state Senate and the House of Delegates right now. I hope those of you that are from Virginia will join with me in fighting to hold those seats in both of those bodies. And then next year, when it all comes down to the most important election, even more important than 2012, a united party is going to get us where we want to go. Thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to seeing you all out there on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Remember, go from here and get out of your comfort zone. And remember that everybody here has the ability to help keep America free. If you haven't attended any of the American Majority training sessions, again, tomorrow starting at 10 a.m. over in the Chesapeake rooms from 10 until 4. Great information. Again, thank you so much. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.